Today we're talking about wood, in particular spruce soundboards. And I'm not alone. Hi, this is Ted Barcelou with Alamo Piano Galleries, and today I have a guest.
My name is Cooper Greenberg.
And he's an expert on wood, which is why he's here today. We're talking about solid spruce soundboards, and I just know how they're impacted on guitars and pianos, but Cooper has actually been to a number of different guitar manufacturers, and I bet you're pretty good at
A little
getting
tappy
tone.
tap. Yeah.
Do they show you how to do that? And
Yeah,
what do
yeah.
you listen for?
I think, when I'm at different places, everybody's a little different, but they're trying to tap on it, get the resonance, see if sound, even without it being finished or anything, is traveling through the wood, and you can hear tones and you can hear a clear kind of vibration going through it, but
Do they have a piece of how do I say it, dull wood? Like, look, this is this expensive stuff.
yeah.
And here's a piece of dog meat.
Yeah,
So, like,
absolutely.
So you can tell, like, one has had, like, what, a ring?
Yeah, and it's like we were at the Ferk factory, and they even had like a piece, like a top that was sitting on a speaker that was playing different frequencies with like sand on it, and just seeing how they watch that stuff, see how it's going to vibrate, and seeing the shapes that
And
come
that's
out of
just a
different frequencies.
plain piece of wood.
Plain piece of wood.
And now on guitars, I'm well aware that different bracing patterns bring out different
Yeah.
resonant frequencies in
Yeah, and
the top.
materials too. We've got a couple guitars to talk about. We got pianos to talk about. I have some questions for you.
Okay,
And-
well, yeah, the first thing I wanted
Yeah.
to mention is that when I first started selling pianos, it seemed like every person that was like the buyer or whoever I was trying to sell, the parents or whatever, a lot of times the dads play guitars. So they
Yeah.
know a lot about guitars and stuff. And so it's real easy to describe a piano in terms of like a giant guitar.
Yeah.
And it's so big that you have to build a really strong foundational
Yeah.
box. But in theory, it's the same thing. It's strings stretched over vibrating wood in a box
Yeah.
that,
So, yeah, across the board, would you say that Yamaha, Steinway, Kawai, Baldwin is, just clarify for me because I'm a guitar guy, is spruce across the board?
spruce is across the board.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you this, back in the economic days, there are laminated spruce soundboards, which is going to have outer layer of spruce on both sides and then
Poplar or something. in there.
something in the
Yeah.
middle, plywood. I mean, it basically, you say it's veneers, but it's really just a plywood soundboard. Some of those pianos sound really great.
Yeah.
And unless someone told you, you wouldn't really know. The one difference is that laminated soundboards on pianos, for the most part, they don't sound as round and as pure, but they're louder.
That's crazy. I was talking to a guy that works for Yairi, does the Alvarez Yairi stuff, and a lot of, even some of their high-end classical guitars, those players prefer the laminate on the back and sides because it's louder.
Right.
And they can cut through. So there's something.
I think it just makes more of a bounce. There's
Yeah, yeah.
probably less absorption of sound. Now, the reason why I asked about all the different kind of bracing patterns, and there's different kind of arguments you can make over whether it's a parlor guitar, a finger pick, a strummer, a dreadnought, or a half size or whatever, is that on a piano, and you mentioned all the major manufacturers, and if you watch any piano manufacturing, when it comes to the soundboard, they're all pretty much doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, some of them don't taper the soundboards,
Yeah.
and others do. And the one thing that is different between a piano and a guitar is how the soundboard is used. And on a piano, the soundboard is not laying flat and supported by like truss rods. It is literally under duress, and the name for that duress of a soundboard is called crown on a piano.
Yeah.
And so, like, if a piano soundboard ever loses its quote unquote crown, it's supposed to be worthless. Take it to the dump, and of course buy a new one because that's all sales propaganda. But the idea behind what the crown does And this is really an interesting, simple thing. It's just a soundboard mounted on 2 blocks of wood, and it comes with this hammer, and it hits like the A440. You can hear.
Yeah.
And then even when it fades out, there's more volume, and there's a roundness of tone.
Yeah.
And so that is what a piano, that's the point of a soundboard that a piano uses to express its entire tone, loud, soft, everything through the hammers, through the keys from the player. So it's a really cool process, but it comes down into having all of the cellular construction placed under duress so that it can resonate more and vibrate more. And guitars do that with their brace patterns.
Yeah. And I think about it like you've always got the bracing on the inside, and then you've got the string tension on the bridge. So there's always that kind of push and pull. And if your bridge pops up or something's loose or you don't have any tension, you're not going to get any sound, you know.
And the idea of maintaining that crown is done with the ribbing on the back of a soundboard.
Yeah.
And so they push the soundboard to that right point to where it is under duress.
Yeah.
And they leave it dry like that. And then, of course, part of, they all talk about, you know, how they smooth down the sandboard to get it, you know, to taper it down so it fits. And part of that is to work that curve, that groove back out so that it does resonate. But the true, what you could say, the same kind of framework and that you have on the back of a guitar soundboard, you have that actually underneath in the timbers on the foundation of the rim of the piano. It's kind of like the back and sides. Yeah. But there's no back on a piano. I mean, the true back of a piano is the soundboard.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so but the box in itself is closed from the soundboard up.
Yeah.
And there are some pianos that are manufactured that were closed on the bottom, and a lot of them that are recording, a lot of times they close them off on the bottom. And there's one guy, I believe, that owns a patent for putting a lid on a piano where it drops down so that sound goes out to the audience reflected off of, you know, like the angle that it makes. So it's kind of interesting,
that is cool.
The reflection of sound. I'm tying this whole thing with soundboards. Started off with a Shigeru Kawai, an SK-2 model piano that is about 25 years old. Yeah. And it came in and it just plays and sounds fantastic. We shot a video on it, and I want to use that as a sound reference for putting it right next to a new SK-2 to see how the differences in the overall construction, and are there any audible and noticeable differences or improvements between the new one and the older one. And I'm sure this is what we talk about a lot of times. When you pick a guitar out and say, hey, Ted, I got one of those guitars, it's because it's the way the spruce is resonant. It's the soundboard. It's the magic to it. And then every now and then I'll say, look, man, I know you're not, but go over there and check out the soundboard. I mean, there's just something about aged soundboard. And, you know, there is a couple of builders out there that specifically go after 100-year-old plus pianos. Yeah. And they're, quote unquote, in the junk business. We will haul off or we'll even pay for certain models. And they're basically gathering up old pianos for the old growth lumber that's in the soundboard. And in most instances, if it's a really nice old piano, they can take all of the ebony off of the black keys, and this guy makes guitar necks out of them. And so they manufacture guitars out of the old spruce, which comes from an old growth tree in the first place. 100 years ago, all the trees were old. Yeah. I mean, they weren't planning, hey, we're going to run out of lumber one day. I mean, it was just like, take it.
You got what you got. Yeah.
Harvest time. Yeah. So let's have a listen.
Yeah.
Well, the idea behind the soundboard is you want every single piano that you make in this model to sound that good, to have that much resonance and sustain and all those kind of things. And there's a lot that goes into it. And the same thing when they're building a guitar. Now, there's a lot of guitars that we all play, and I never really get attached to anything, even though a lot of the stuff, and if anything I like, I know it's going to be more than I could ever afford.
Yeah.
But there is that, I believe it's an HD28, is that Rich Roberson
Rich
model.
Rollins, yeah.
And I asked about the soundboard on that thing because I like it because, one, it looks a lot like my old Epiphone, which is at least 50 some odd years old.
Yeah.
That guitar is, I've had a lot of customers play.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell
me a little bit about that soundboard, that bracing, and then how you find that same kind of thing that I find in pianos, you find in guitars.
So that guitar, if you're not familiar with Guitar Side, we have reviewed this guitar on the Guitar Channel. Martin makes the D28 modeled after that Rich Robinson model, his personal guitar that I think was a 70s model. And it is made to look and sound like a vintage Martin, which vintage Martins still sort of the gold standard for people looking for vintage guitars and valuable guitars. And it's not like the 70s are the most coveted era, 30s and 40s stuff, obviously golden era, but they're absolute gems still that blow you away. And I did bring along some show and tell. So this is not that rich model, but this is a true 1975 D28.
Okay.
And it's surprising because it looks extremely clean. Actually, sorry, D35. So D35, spruce rosewood, but mainly looking at the soundboard here because we're talking soundboards. This is Sitka spruce. And spruce obviously is, you can see mahogany top guitars, Koa top guitars, everything, but this is the classic. In the pre-war era, it'd be more prevalently Adirondack spruce, but we got Sitka spruce here that has been played for almost 50 years. And so you've got wood that was not artificially aged in any way. Obviously, it was dried. All spruce that is used in guitars is kiln dried at this point. And so there is the moisture removing process that will make it strong, but also resonate more. And it's not going to change its shape on you or shrink or expand as much as it would if it were still, kind of wet wood. But this is 50-year-old spruce on this guitar. And it has been played and tugged at with the bridge, gotten pressure for years and years. And this is kind of the blueprint for what many guitar manufacturers now are doing with certain models where this is a brand new guitar that has been treated with Martin's vintage tone system. So this is basically a rapidly thermal aged spruce. So this is considered a premium upgrade on Martin guitars. You can get a brand new D35 that's just got a clean, untouched Sitka spruce, or you can get this vintage tone system or VTS on a modern deluxe guitar. Taylor does the same thing. They call it Torrification, but is meant to mimic what wood would sound like after years and years of play. And that's where it comes into your opinion. Do you call BS or not?
So is it like AI aged?
It's like proto AI aging. All right. So they got their normal Sitka, and then they can take these pieces of Sitka. As you can tell, the coloration is obviously very different than a brand new Martin guitar, but this is a brand new Martin guitar. So it looks a little bit darker. And what they say it does to the tone is not necessarily make it louder, but make it a little bit rounder, a little more played in sounding. And I think there's a few different angles to look at it from. One being this is seen as a more premium feature. However, most people that are going after vintage Martins probably want their guitar to age with them and change over time and play it in. So my question is, because you've got this on guitars, you've got artificial aging, and then you've got people looking for vintage guitars that are already played in, and then there's what I would consider to be the majority of people that they saw their grandfather or their dad or whoever playing a D35 when they were a kid, and they always wanted to save up and buy one. Now they want to be able to age with that guitar. I know that Kawai on the Shigeru models use that Ezo spruce that real, which, as a heads up, we tried to get a hold of some and have Martin build us a guitar with that so we could match it with a piano, and they couldn't do it for us. So if anybody's got a line on Ezo Spruce, let us make some guitars
You
with
want
it.
piano top guitars.
I want piano top guitars. But I was doing a little research on the soundboards of the Shigurus because I know there is a heavy-duty aging process for that spruce, and I don't believe that they're doing any heat treatment or anything like that. I think they're doing natural aging.
It is, and most of the piano manufacturers, all of the European piano manufacturers, Blüthner, Estonia, Bosendorfer, all of them, their wood sits out in a lumber yard, and you know what, Steinway's the same one. And the most part, it looks like a junkyard. In the winter, it looks horrible, but no, it does.
Yeah.
It just looks like piles of junk sitting around.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when the seasons change, it starts getting muddy and all that. And you think about it, most of the piano manufacturers are at a certain, latitude and that's for a reason.
Yeah.
They want the trees that grow over 1,000 feet high from
It's
the,
like
the
wineries.
Alps.
You know, it's
Okay.
like California, Italy, France, they're all in the same.
Exactly. And so they all have the same kind of very dry, cold winters.
Yeah.
And I think that has something to do with drying out the wood.
Yeah.
And a certain way over, they're starting to find out, is like at least 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I believe that Kawai is at a minimum 15 some odd years.
Yeah.
And some of the other soundboards, even it's odd because when a soundboard goes into the instrument, whether it's a guitar or a piano, that spruce top, it looks brand new.
Yeah.
And it could be 50 or 60 years old at that point, and just, you know, aged. But and you don't know how old the tree was.
Yeah.
But just that lumber could have been sitting around that long.
Yeah.
And then, but it looks brand new. And so is it really going to sound like one that has been an instrument? Because once it's formed into that soundboard, I think that's when the true aging starts.
Yeah.
Because it's put into that form, you're no longer a tree, you're a soundboard.
Yeah.
And the longer you're a soundboard,
Begins the new life.
the
there.
new life,
Yeah.
right.
I know, like, we've seen some, you know, arborist lumber areas where Taylor has their wood and it stays out there for years and years because naturally it dries out and then it gets moisture put back in and then dries out again. And it's that kind of pressure and release over and over before you just mill it, throw it on an instrument and go. So it has the preparation phase, and then some of it gets torrified, some just goes on guitars, but it's dried and all this, and then it starts that process, and then you can really start playing it and changing the sound over time. I will say, and this is pure opinion, but in the world of guitars, obviously you got more options. You can get old growth, you can buy a vintage guitar, you can buy brand new, you can buy treated, whatever you want. But I do feel like I trust a manufacturer who's been doing it for a long time, that they just got a process and that's what they stick to. So I like that there's not like Kawai every year, this is our new way of aging this, or it's like they know what they're doing. And I feel like when you play that SK-2 brand new one, it sounds incredible, but it's sort of a testament to that's a lifetime purchase. That's something that you want in your home forever. So as you play it, as you work it out, what was done before on that wood is going to set the kind of future to it continues to sound better and better, you know?
It's interesting because I always like to Google simple questions. How long does a good piano last?
Yeah.
And on average, the first answer you come up with 100 plus years.
Yeah.
So you think about how many 100-year-old guitars have you played? You've probably played more 100-year-old pianos than guitars.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're a guitar guy.
I mean, the only one I think would be at the Martin factory. You know, if one came in here or there, but none besides those museum guitars. When people say, I brought in this guitar, it's from 1920, typically it's not very well taken care of,
Right.
you know. And if it was well taken care of and well built in 1920, it's going to be worth an insane amount that nobody would just be walking
Yeah,
in
and
there, you
I
know?
often think too is like what you said is they're not being cared for, and a lot of times you see that in pianos too. It's not that they're abused or anything. It's just that they're neglected. They're just left
Yeah.
there. And, they're just left there. And that guitar, that it bends, it warps, whatever. And even though it has a great sound, it'd be such a monster to play
Yeah.
that you're better off with a new one.
Yeah.
And there comes a point where pianos like that, but I'm a contender to believe that pianos have a lot of value in recycling that wood, particularly in their soundboards, because
Yeah.
it's rare that there's ever a piano that was made with a really cheesy, raunchy piece of soundboard.
Yeah.
You're going to go through all that trouble to cast out some iron, use
Yeah,
all
you
that
might as well
support.
use
You
some
might
good
as
stuff.
well get something halfway decent
Yeah.
in a soundboard, and a lot of them are just going to the dump. And that's where I think that some of the recycling is a good idea.
Yeah, it is.
Long conversation about soundboards.
Long conversation. However, it may sound cheesy, but if you got a great piano already, and it sounds amazing like a brand new SK-2, the only way to make it sound better is to play it.
And grow old with it.
It'll keep working, it'll keep changing, but it'll continue to get better the more that you play it.
Cooper, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Ted Barslew with Cooper Greenberg, and we've been talking soundboards. We'll see you next time.